That's one heck of a way to start with a nice chunky one. Right in the corner of the mouth. Not a bad little fish on that chatterbait there. We're out here on Mastodon Lake in Aurora, Illinois. Welcome into this week's episode of Tony's Spot on Fishing. I'm your host, Tony Krizek. We're gonna go ahead and get her back. And let me tell you, if you're around the Chicagoland area this mid to end part of May, you know the weather has just been insanity. And we're actually answering a request of one of our viewers out here, several requests actually, to come out to Mastodon and film it. More thunderstorms coming. We don't know how long will last today, but we're going to show you all the tips, tricks, and techniques of how we can catch some fish out here, even with this weather. That's all today on Tony's Spot on Fishing. So what we're doing today, it's kind of a new one for us. We've really not done much out here on Mastodon. Maybe a time here, a time there. Never put forth a real effort. And a lot of viewers have written in over the last couple seasons asking us to come out here and film. Now, let's talk about just, what we're dealing with weather-wise. 3 different low pressure systems have kind of swept through the area. We currently have another storm that we're working on right now. And what can we do to catch fish when it's like this? Water temperatures have fluctuated because we've had warm air for a few days, and then we're dropping back cold. We've had cold rains, warm rains, all over the place. Realistically, the best thing we can do is fish moving baits. And we want baits that are going to actually get the fish's attention. We want baits that are going to be of high vibration, flash, color. The water's a lot dirtier, so we're going to look and pretty much power fish this whole thing. And power fishing means moving baits, so we're talking chatterbaits, red-eye shads, the lipless crankbaits, even some jerk baits, be it the hard plastic variety or soft plastic even. That first fish right off the bat, right tight to the bank. And a lot of time when that water comes up, we have higher water, a little dirtier, fish are still kind of in that spawning mentality. They're going to be up tight to bank. So don't be afraid to pitch just about a foot, foot and a half off that shoreline. That's exactly where that guy was sitting. And we can just run through, walk the shores all around. We're finding a lot of shallow water and some deeper pockets. And it seems like this little area off this point, we have a nice isolated weed flat on both sides of it with a washout. Again, it's that whole spot on the spot. These are the types of structures too we want to look for. Little fallen timber along the shoreline too helps give them a little extra cover as well. Holy cow. Boy, we've been watching this thing kind of creeping up on us. We knew it was coming. Weatherman just pretty much called for rain, and lo and behold, we get a thunderstorm with a heavy downpour. Thankfully, there's a nice little shelter area here, kind of keep us out of the weather here. It looks like it's going to pass through quick, and we can get right back to it, hopefully catch a few more fish.
First top water of the year for me.
There we go. Mike switched up to a spook there. Is there a spook? Need some pliers? Got it. Not the most aggressive strike in the world, but there's no doubt the fish calling powers that a topwater bait has.
My hands are frozen from that rain.
It was definitely temp dropped, the rain poured.
Oh man, she got all of that. Right? Yeah. Change this up here. Got the mosquitoes out now too. Sorry for the mud, baby. There we go. Good old fish.
There we go. Got some weight to it.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and we'll get her back. And away she goes.
right there on that chatterbait again. My goodness. Good healthy looking fish too out here. I'll tell you what, this place is making a believer out of me more and more. Like I said, it's a fishery I have not really spent a lot of time on. And we were just answering the requests of some viewers, and man, I'll tell you, that's 3 fish landed, between one for my cameraman and a couple for me, and that one I lost. And these have been good quality fish. I mean, this is a nice little fishery right here in Aurora. Nice, quiet, peaceful area. And again, both of those fish, that one I just lost and that one there, pitching right up tight to the bank. There's some down timber. These fish are sitting right off of this point. Little vegetation, little timber. The 2 spots come together, spot on the spot, and we're finding the fish. Well, I'll tell you what, folks, we're running out of light here on our first afternoon out here at Mastodon. We got a few fish to go. I mean, the weather is less than pleasant, that's for sure. But I'll tell you what, we still were able to get a few fish to go. Top waters, don't be afraid to throw top waters, especially right after a front, in between fronts. There's always something about the fish calling powers of a top water. When used correctly, it's one of the most best fish finding tools you can have in your arsenal. And also that chatterbait, my goodness gracious, we'd have been lost without that thing tonight. Good high vibration baits in this muddy water when these fish are close to shore. But I'll tell you what, a couple days we are going to be back out here. We're going to let this weather calm down a little bit and get right back to it and continue showing you how we catch fish out here. So here we are, day 2 back here at Mastodon Lake in Aurora. And again, we're kind of sticking with that same presentation. We're going to be throwing that chatterbait, throw some buzz baits, you can throw a spinner bait. We want baits that are going to make a lot of noise and a lot of vibration. Water's still pretty murked up right now, so we're going to want to throw brighter colors. We'll show you in a little bit the actual chatterbait we've been throwing out here. They've been catching fish, and we're going to throw again today. It's actually one I tied up on my own. It's just a little bluegill pattern. And we'll show you all that, but what we want to show you now is exactly kind of the areas we're throwing to and where we're finding a lot of these fish. The water's up a little bit, so we're having a little higher water right now. There's down debris, timber, stuff like that. And these fish are utilizing all that area. And it's not uncommon, we're throwing pretty tight to the bank. And pretty much where I just threw is going to be about the furthest out where we've had action from any of these fish. Now there's vegetation around as well. And that's what's nice about a chatterbait over like a red eye. And there we picked up just a little bit on the back end in. But they're virtually weedless. We can get them through a lot of this stuff. No issues. We'll fire that thing right down the shore. And anytime we hit any kind of vegetation, timber, anything like that, we'll just go ahead and rip it. Most of the time, we can actually get that to blow off of there. Pretty much running it the same way we'd run any of our spinner baits. Medium heavy action rods, prefer braided line, just especially with the cover, the timber, the vegetation. And anytime we run single hooks like this, having braided line just gives you a little bit more. You get a little more edge getting that hook in and keeping that fish buttoned up. Oh, I love that chatterbait, let me tell you. Again, it goes right back to finding that timber. These fish are definitely relating to it. Not a bad little fish there. Smaller little male. But these fish, we're already figuring out the pattern. There's enough timber around, and anytime we're finding the down timber, that's where we're finding these guys. So the key is looking for those 2 kinds of structure coming together. Timber and vegetation. And anytime we've had it, that's where we're finding these largemouth. This time of year, there's really no reason to stay put too long in one spot. You know, you may catch 1 or 2 fish off of an area, off a weed edge, and then you just keep going. Now, we are finding the majority of the fish we've contacted have come from the timber, where the timber and the weeds come together. But as with the last time we were here, our camera guy Ended up hooking one on a topwater, just fishing a main weed flat. A bass is a bass is a bass. He's going to relate to whatever structure's around him to use as an ambush point. Given the weather conditions we've had around here lately, all the fronts and storms and rain and wind, it does really no good to sit here and try to finesse these fish at this point. Make a few casts. Like if I don't stick one here, we're on to just keep walking down the shoreline. It does absolutely no good to sit there and try to finesse them. Now, once fish are a little more active, I have no issues taking a big weed flat and slowing down and, you know, fishing a Cinco or anything like that through it. But for right now, we need to just find active fish. Cast and walk, keep covering water, and find those fish. Oh, God. My goodness gracious. That one was sitting right at my feet. Not a big fish, but a fish nonetheless. Scared the heck out of me. Was literally just about to pull that bait right out of the water. Another little guy eats that chatterbait. Something about that high vibration, they can't resist it. You know, neutral fish will become active fish. Some of these areas, we've had to kind of abandon that whole timber area. You know, we picked off a few fish. All of a sudden, we start hitting more and more of it. We're not catching fish, so we're back to just fishing those main weed flats again. And we were just talking, my camera guy and I, about even switching baits. The chatterbait's almost even a little too much for some of this weed growth, and you know, we can run a buzz bait or a topwater spinnerbait even over it. But once again, lo and behold, that chatterbait getting it done. Kind of hard to put it down, I'll tell you. You know, played around, made a few casts with that buzz bait. Could not get them to react for anything. Another little male there. And I said, you know, I'm starting to watch having my polarized glasses on, and I'm seeing these bluegills just kind of coming and darting in and out of these pockets. Almost like they're kind of getting chased, and occasionally you'll see some swirls coming up after them, and they're kind of running in tight to the shore again. And I said, you know, I could not get fish to react to that buzzbait, so immediately I went right back to that chatterbait. And being that, you know, I tied that one up in that bluegill pattern, it's pretty safe to say, oh, man, that was a good fish. Ate it right there in front of me. These fish are really feeding heavily on these bluegills right now. And that's their main forage base out here. They're eating bluegills and sunfish and stuff like that. I want a shot at that one I just missed there, because that was a much better fish. You know, and the other thing we're starting to see now, a little bit of activity. The bluegills, the bass starting to feed a little more aggressive. Sun's getting a little lower in the sky. We're getting a little less light penetration. So early, you know, if I had to pick my ideal times to come out here, I'd go early morning and in the evening just before sunset. And true, that can be said of any body of water, don't get me wrong, but some lakes, it really just makes a huge difference, a world of difference. And right now we're already starting to see that these windows seem to be first light, last light kind of thing. I'll tell you what, folks, we're gonna wrap things up here for our second little outing. Just doing some evening shots here out at Mastodon. And I'll tell you what, things have definitely changed a little bit. It's been 2 days since we were here. Surprisingly, we've had a dry spell for 2 days. But now we're also seeing some more changes. You're also getting a lot of that cottonwood or the dogwood that's literally covering 3/4 of this lake, making it pretty impossible to get a lot of baits there. It's always following your line, sliding down it, running down to your knots. You're always picking the stuff out. So it always makes it a little more challenging. But I'll tell you what, we were able to dodge some of it, fish some of these weed flats where it wasn't. That chatterbait has been the ticket. You know, you want that thump vibration that the chatterbait has. It's more than a lipless crankbait. It's a lot more than that. So, and you can run it with just a single hook. So you're gonna be able to get through a lot of this slop a lot easier. But we got one more day. We're gonna do a morning shot next here, and we're gonna show you again how we keep tackling Mastodon in Aurora, Illinois. Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, back out here for day 3. Changing it up a little bit, we're doing a morning shot. Our last 2 trips have always been right around sunset in the evening. So we thought we'd change it up today and head out here for a few hours this morning. Well, I'll tell you, conditions sure have changed in the last couple days since we've been here. Water's starting to recede a little bit. We're getting back to that normal pool level. Also noticing a lot more vegetation because that water's coming down. Chatterbait's a little harder to get through some of these weed beds. So we may switch things up and go to a spinnerbait or things of that nature. The other thing, of course, good old topwater, be it a Zara spook or jitterbug, any of that. However, there's downsides to that too. There's cottonwood everywhere out here. And it is just making it extremely tough to get any kind of bait through it. Be it a spinnerbait, a chatterbait, even the topwaters, we're constantly picking stuff off the line, off the baits. It's interfering with how the baits are running. It's really making this a nightmare. But we're gonna push through and see if we can't get a few fish to go and find some areas maybe where we can get a little clearing to actually run these baits properly. But unfortunately, when that cottonwood comes up, man, it is tough to do anything. I mean, even plastics, it is gonna foul stuff up. So we're gonna persevere, get through it, and hopefully we'll put a few more fish up to the shore here and show you how we can deal with tough changing conditions out here on Mastodon. Oh, came off. Well, there we go. That was one good swipe at the bait. Tore up my trailer pretty good. Boy, I'll tell you, we have been struggling this morning. And it was just a good sign to finally have one react to a bait. Weeds are down here a little bit, so we were able to go back to that chatterbait. You know, there's a big difference between a chatterbait and a spinnerbait. Chatterbaits, you know, are very high in vibration. And a lot of times when these fish are kind of neutral in aggression, that vibration off of a chatterbait can really trigger a lot more strikes. I get asked quite a bit what I like to run for a trailer on a chatterbait. And you can run a standard paddle tail, a swim bait on the back end. But what I like to do is actually use a swim Senko. And I'll go ahead and I just cut off about, because they're about 5 inches or so. I'll cut off maybe 2 or 3 inches because I don't need it to be sitting that far back. That's going to give us a lot more of those short strikes. So I'll just cut it down and then go ahead and thread it right on up. And the other thing too, this is that same custom bluegill chatterbait we showed you a little earlier that I had tied up. What's kind of nice is it gives you a little bit different look than a standard silicone skirt. Has the hair and the flash to it. And the other thing we're going to do, you know, think about those bluegills when you see them running around the shore as they're spawning. They always have that little bit of color to them in the tail. So we'll take our little chartreuse marker. It's got a little garlic scent to it as well. Now, being a moving bait, scent really isn't all that important. This is really more for just the color. I'm just going to go ahead and put a little bit right on the paddle tail, right around the edges there, just to give a little bit of color like that. There we go. Now that fish was still sitting shallow here, pitching right along the shore like that. I know I've got a couple buddies that have been out fishing it, and that has definitely been the pattern out here. These fish tend to sit close to shore, especially with the bluegills up spawning. They're going to feed pretty heavily on those gills. So where you're seeing bluegills on beds and running around tight to shore, the largemouth aren't going to be too far. from those bluegills. That's their main food source out here. And again, as you're going along, you can look at other parts of structure like we've been fishing where you get the timber, where it's the timber meets with the weeds. Anytime we can get multiple pieces of structure together, we're going to keep focusing on stuff like that. And one more little thing too, you may notice as I'm kind of going along, at times I'm going to start pumping the rod. What it is I'm hitting a little bit of vegetation. And it's just a little slight twitch of the wrist. It's all we need. And it'll a lot of times break that vegetation right off of the bait. And when that happens, it creates like a little bit of an explosion under the water. You get that big cloud as it busts through. And a lot of times that'll trigger strikes too. But don't be afraid to fire some casts off straight out. There's monstrous weed flats out here. And these fish will roam all over. Don't get me wrong, they're not all going to be tight to the bank. But we know the most active fish are going to be there right now with those bluegills being out. There we go. Oh, mercy. Boy, we had to work for that one. Not a real big fish. Not big at all. But my goodness, when the going gets tough, we're still finding a way to catch something. That was back on that chatterbait. And again, that same philosophy we've had where these structures come together like this. And we have the timber meeting the vegetation, still producing some fish. Now, I don't know what's got them so turned off right now. If it's this another pressure change coming, another weather system coming. But my goodness gracious, it is a totally different lake than what we've experienced these last couple days out here. Normally we've had carp jumping everywhere, both the common carp and the grass carp that are out here. We have not seen one carp come up. I mean, there's still the bluegills on the beds and running around there, but it is just everything else has calmed down. But this will happen. You have all these wind shifts, water levels receding, that messes with them. But if you put the time in, you put the effort in, you can still catch some fish. Now, that little guy was nothing to write home about by no means, but nevertheless, it's a good sign that we're able to trigger these fish. I'll tell you, if it kind of keeps up like this, what we may even do is switch to a swim jig. Now, I know, you guys are probably thinking, Tone, you just talked about how the chatterbait is this high intensity vibration. A swim jig is very, very little vibration. But a lot of times, that can trigger neutral fish as well. Sometimes it just takes waiting for that storm to come in. It's a lot of factors that play into it. We've pretty much lost the ability to throw the topwaters right now. The sun's peeking out and there's really no cloud cover per se. So anytime that sun gets high in the sky like that, it's just pointless to really go to a topwater. They really won't feed on it too heavily. And it's a shame because there's definitely fish calling power to a topwater, that's for sure. But we have other baits we can play with. And of course, what really makes things rough is all of this cottonwood out here. Some areas worse than others, and it's just impossible to get baits through, and that doesn't help your cause either when you got all that cottonwood around your bait. Pretty hard to get bites that way. There we go. That's a better one. Oh my goodness. Right in the corner of the mouth. Well, by gosh, maybe they're starting to turn on a little bit. It's a decent little fish there. Tell you what, that chatterbait starting to pick up some bites again. We're gonna go ahead and get her back on in. Yeah, I literally just missed one. Felt like a little smaller fish, pretty much like that first one on day 3 out here. Fired right back through. A little better fish eats. That's pretty good. We like that. So again, now we're kind of back in that question of, okay, we've gone, 2-3 hours out here, really struggling. Now all of a sudden, boom, 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 we catch one, we miss one, miss another one, catch one. Is there feeding windows? This and that. And if you look at the particular feeding windows for today, that's not the case. We're already out of the major. We've already hit our minor period as far as the moon phase, the solar lunar goes. So we can't really say that that's going to play into it. We can also talk about a little bit of clouds on the horizon. It's possible that that's going to start to trigger these fish. We have noticed a couple of the carp coming up now, and it's just one of those little windows in the marine world that's opening up. But I'll tell you, regardless of what you're throwing, if you're going to throw chatterbait, if you're going to throw spinnerbait, swim jig, if you're going to fish plastics, the main forage base that we're seeing out here are these bluegills. So try to match that if you're coming out here to try your hand at this. Now it will get weed choked. It'll get very weed choked in the summer. And talking to some guys about this place, we get a really good frog bite going in the summer months out here. So probably in about another 3 weeks or so, when this thing is really choked up, we'll come back with our frogging rods and see what kind of damage we can do out here. Because there's nothing more fun than that to me. Coming out frogging, fishing the slop, having fish on top waters. That's what it's all about. There we go. That's a nice one. Well, she just thought she was big, but decent nonetheless. Oh man, right in the corner of the mouth again. Want to grab a quick pic for Facebook there? Sure. But yeah, I'll tell you what, folks, that is third bass now that we've landed, and I mean, bites have been at a premium today. Get a little picture for all our Facebook fans here. All right, we're gonna go ahead and set her right back down. But again, that chatterbait now starting to produce again. And again, just throwing right down the shoreline. And they're hitting it hard. The aggression is there. It has just been really wild how those first 2 hours or so we've been out here has just been a struggle like that. But my goodness. Little guy. Look at this. Let's get a shot of this. This little guy just inhaled that chatterbait. Little guy, but boy, he crushed it. Tell you, it's amazing. Sun's up a little bit. You'd think this real shallow water bite would subside and slow down, but it really hasn't. It's actually picking up, having a little more light penetration like this. And the only thing I can honestly think of, folks, is that it's the actual, that next front is getting a little closer, and we're starting to get these fish feeding now again heavily. Well, hey everybody, that's about all the time we have for this episode. We hope we shed some light on good old Mastodon Lake here in Aurora. And I'll tell you what, despite all the weather adversities, we got another storm coming in right now. The wind's picked up, it's clouding over, it's about ready to start coming in, so we're getting out of here. Despite all the curveballs Mother Nature's throwing us, we're showing you guys and girls we can still catch some fish out here. And thank you to all the viewers who have written in asking for this spot. I'll tell you what, without you guys, this show's nothing. So a big thank you. Keep them coming in, all your requests. Facebook, check us out, Spot On Fishing on Facebook. We can answer your requests there. But again, that's it for this show, folks. We'll see you next time, right here on Tony's Spot On Fishing.